Okay, we got a 3-year-old here, Sport, and the reason we're using him is because he's about the same size as Earl, maybe a little bit bigger, a little taller, not as big around maybe, but and we'll use Earl's harness on him just to show you how it fits. And we'll do him outside today. There's a little more room, maybe a little better light than the barn. I usually have them in cross ties in the barn when I hitch them, but we'll do this guy outside if he'll stand for us. I think I drove him once last fall in October or November, and he's been outside all winter, so we just cleaned him up a little bit. But in another month we'll shave him and he'll look altogether different. Anyway, we'll put the harness on him and we'll talk about it, and if you have any questions, just phone me or whatever. I'd like to have all the harness in a harness bag, so it's kind of all organized. It keeps the harness better, and
Maybe tell them about Glover's.
it's a lot better than just throwing it in a pile and looking for parts and stuff. These harness bags are made by Glover's here in Manitoba, and they're probably the best harness bags you'll find anywhere. But made by
Glover Equine.
Glover Equine in Boissevain, Manitoba. You can look them up on the net. So we'll put the back pad on them. First of all, I'll show you that most harness just comes with the back pad, and I've put another pad underneath here just to make it smoother. It's sort of just like putting a blanket on your horse. Sometimes the saddle without a blanket would dig into your horse's back, so you put a back pad on or a blanket on your saddle horse, and this, I do the same with my miniatures so that these nuts on the turrets don't stick into his back.
You gotta show how it's got it.
And I just it straps on, but I have a farmer's zip tie on the top here just to hold it really in place too. It's sort of the same color as the harness and it doesn't look too bad. So anyway, we'll just put it on. Oh boy. And driving harness is a little different than a saddle. It doesn't have to be real tight. Just something like that. You wouldn't want to ride with your saddle that loose, but harness, I think that's okay. I want it back from his withers a little bit. If the horse is fat, they sometimes don't have any withers, but this guy's got pretty good withers. It's just hard to see in all the hair this time of year. Then we'll put our crupper on. Oh boy. Just to keep the back pad from slipping over his withers when he stops or something. And it holds back in place.
You should always tie those up too when you're not using it, right? So the crupper doesn't break.
Oh, that's a good idea. When you're putting the crupper on, make sure you don't have a bunch of hair underneath it. If you do a lot of driving and the hair is underneath, it kind of can cut them underneath, make them sore. But
and when you clip them, it should be that little triangle that's left, right? That kind of gets blended into the
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
clipped area.
that could be a little tighter for this guy. This harness is pretty adjustable.
You're just shortening it up.
Yeah, that's about right. That'll keep the back pad from slipping ahead. He's obviously just a little bit shorter horse than Earl in the back. This harness hasn't been used for well over a year, that's for sure. 2 years almost. But that's what we used to use on Earl, and we used to show him in this harness. So that's where we start with. Now we'll put the breast collar on.
I guess you usually have them drive in a practice harness and then keep your show harness clean for
Right.
showing.
See how this fits him?
So what are you looking for here?
Well, you want the. This isn't as adjustable as it should be, maybe. In my mind, that's a little too low on him because he's pulling right on, almost on his shoulders, just a little above. And there's nerves and stuff in here, and there's too much action when he's trying to pull, and you want a horse that's free on the front end. And this is going to impede his movement a little bit. It should be about up there. Lots of people are concerned that if it's too high, it's going to cut off a horse's wind. But a driving horse isn't pulling anything real heavy, and I've never seen a driving horse get cut off from wind yet. I haven't seen their ear get cut off. So I think it should be up there as opposed to down here. This still is better than some people that have it way down here, but there isn't a lot of adjustment on this harness. I'd have to modify it a little bit. So for today, we'll just leave it like that, but preferably it should be like that, okay?
So if you could have adjusted this one, where would you prefer to adjust it? Right up in there?
Yeah. We probably can make that work too.
You're just going to hook that in.
And it's okay to start with it a little too high, because once you start driving a horse, the harness seems to loosen up. The horse relaxes a bit and the harness fits better. It's a little bigger than it seems when you first harness him. But for sure, I'd have it that high. A little hard to see, but there's the point of his shoulder. And so that gives you an idea anyway. Better to have it too high than too low, that's for sure.
So what are you doing with this little piece? Just not using it this time?
We just won't use it.
Okay.
For today, we'll just let it sit here. Next thing is our bridle. All the professional trainers and everything say should put the bridle on first so the horse can't see what's going on, but I like to do it totally opposite. I like the horse to be able to see what's going on, and if the horse knows what's going on, after you do it a few times, they're used to it and say, oh yeah, go to it, you know. You just have to make sure that once you take the halter off and have the cart hooked up and everything, that the horse doesn't get away on you. But that's never happened to me in 30 years, but that might still happen, I don't know.
So yeah, they'll say you should never have a horse harnessed up in the cart without, or with its halter on, is what you're saying too. Is that right?
Well, with it, should never tie it by its bridle.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a cabochon just to, I always drive a horse with a cabochon. I guess that's because I drive a lot of young horses and start horses and stuff. So have a cabochon just to keep them from opening their mouth. But a well-trained horse, he'll have the feel of the soft reins and everything, and your hands, if they're good soft hands, he won't have his mouth gaping open. But a young horse, he's not used to the bit and stuff, and he'll be running around the ring with his mouth half open and playing with the bit. and you don't want that. So I always start them with a Cavasson. Okay, boy, just hang on. We'll just put it on loose at the moment because we haven't got the bit in his mouth yet. How's that? You like that? Okay.
Because you want him to be able to open his mouth easily to get the bit in.
Right, that's the idea. I use a straight bit all the time. My hitch, my 8-horse hitch, I use straight bits on them. It's kind of a no-pinch bit. They're a very inexpensive bit, but they don't pinch. They eventually do wear out, but for $14 or something, it's easy to replace them. A friend of mine says he'd never put anything in his horse's mouth that didn't cost $250. So I don't tell him that my bits cost me $14. But the nice thing about a straight bit, from my mind, is if you got good driving hands, you can just drive with your little fingers, and the horse can feel it all the time, and the bit isn't loose and moving around in his mouth. And that's what all I've used for years. I've used other bits too. Always come back to these, but that's everybody's preference too. Now I don't know if this fits you or not, buddy. Let's try it here. Oh boy. Not too much hair, huh?
Yeah.
Not in show shape right now. He's obviously playing with it a little bit. It could be a little tighter, for sure.
So are you looking for the 3 little wrinkles at the edge of their cheeks like you would with a saddle horse? Like a bridle?
Yeah.
Not quite?
These are smaller horses. I don't think you need 3 wrinkles. I don't think it needs to be that tight. But
you just don't want it hanging, bumping its teeth either.
That's right. That's a good point. Yeah, that's right, Corinne. So that's about right, I think. Okay, we got our bridle on, and then we have our check. And with a young horse, you don't want to make the check too tight. You can check your horse right up nice and tight once it's well enough trained that it knows to push off the back end and lift its front end. But for a starter horse, if you check them up too tight, you're just going to get frustrated and everything. So I just started with fairly loose. A horse like Earl that's been driven a lot, you can have it tighter on him. But then again, it depends how the horse is built too. And Earl carries his head maybe a little lower than this guy does. But he's used to being checked up a bit, and he gets used to it. So start it off loose anyway. And we have a running martingale here too. That's totally optional equipment as well. But the running martingale keeps a horse from flipping its head up, especially a young horse. It trains them to drive steady with their head kind of in one position where they're throwing their head around too much. And the idea is to have your line straight from the bit through the martingale, through the turrets here. Kind of have a straight line, depends on how your
Sorry, do you
horse
want to just
carries
point that
his
out
head.
again? I
So
didn't
if
get
he
the angle.
get your horse trained so he carries his head higher, you obviously would make these longer.
Can you just point that angle again? I kind of think I didn't quite get that.
Okay?
Okay.
For a horse for just around the yard and stuff, this guy's probably going to carry his head about that way if you're just driving him in the yard. But you always want the line straight from the bit through the running martingale and through here, so kind of a straight line. We'll show that when we get the lines on him once we hitch him up. Okay, with our cart, bring it up behind the horse, of course. Make sure you don't hit your horse with it, so you always have it up high. Lower it down. You feel it on both sides of them. Run through the carriers here. That's, I think that's about the right height. Some people say that it's too high, and it is angling up, but it's far better to have it a little bit high, and that way if you have a young horse or a horse that's prone to accidents or something, they're not going to get their leg over top of it if it's down here. And it just looks so much better when it's up high. It shows off your horse's leg more and looks like horse you got more action. So I prefer to have it about that height. And we'll just
So you have to make sure it's underneath. What do you call those there?
well, I call them the shaft carriers.
Okay.
Make sure your trace is underneath it, not through it, but it doesn't really matter, I guess, but have it underneath. Some carts have these carriers to keep your traces from dangling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does it look about right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the same on this side. Oh, boy. You're doing good. You're a young horse. There we go.
And some of these are a little different too, right?
Yeah, this is an older cart. This cart really doesn't fit this horse. He could get away with 48-inch shafts, and I think these are 52-inch shafts, something like that. It was made for a little bigger horse. I probably should have used a different cart. Ideally, these should be hanging straight down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we could do it like that. But the idea of this is to be back here so that the cart doesn't run ahead and hit the horse from behind, right?
Oh, so that the shaft carrier should be ahead of the bump.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this keeps the cart from running ahead if you're going downhill or stopping or something.
And you don't want the point past the shoulder either.
The
Is that
point
right?
of the shaft should be at about the shoulder, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, this is not the best example in the world, is it? Should I get a different cart?
It's okay.
It's all right?
Yes.
Okay. As long as we understand.
You're just saying that one is pushing it a little bit. It's a little bit
This is,
right now.
Yeah. It's not 3 inches ahead of him or anything like that, but it is a couple inches ahead of his point of his shoulder. But it's not
awful.
terrible. So let's just, for today, forget that we have these on here, okay? A lot of carts don't have these at all. So that's about the way it should look. Just forget that this is here, okay? and you
So
you
you
actually
usually-
don't need them. These are your shaft wraps, okay?
And you usually just tie them up when you're done so they don't drag and get dirty.
That's right. Now, different ways of doing them.
But yours is the best way.
And well, some saddlebred people taught me 30 years ago to do it this way. So you just go up the side of the horse, over top and down, okay, and then in front of yourself, okay, in front of itself, like that.
Okay.
And you go through here.
Underneath.
Well, no, over top, sort of.
Well, you're not going through the...
You don't go through the
Right.
trace carrier or the shaft carrier, but you just go
Yeah.
underneath, over top of itself, and then that locks this tight, okay? You go up and over again. And it depends how much you have. We got lots here, so we could just do it this way is okay.
I try to balance it out evenly between the two sides, generally, right?
Yeah. Always when you're doing up your buckles, put the harness through the buckle, through the keeper, so you don't have a bunch of dangling parts. Now we'll do up the other side, and that'll keep this tight, and the cart won't go ahead. So it does not need this. When we do up the other side, that'll tighten it up, okay?
Okay.
Are we ready to go again? We had some technical difficulties, so we'll have to start this side again.
Sorry.
But anyway, we do this side exactly the same as the other side. We take our wrap here, put it over the shaft, make it a little snugger this time, and around, in front of itself, and then through, if you can see that. That makes sense? And when you put it through and pull it tight, it locks this first piece, this first wrap, it locks it right on. And you just go down.
So you're saying through between the
Yeah,
traces and the carrier, but not through the carrier itself.
right, right.
Okay.
Then we'll just do it up here. Make sure we put it through the holder.
And how tight?
It's actually tighter than the saddle pad or saddle piece that we put on first. But there's not much give to it. And it's locked on tight. Nothing mechanical about it as far as this isn't doing anything. We're going to forget that it's even there. But you can't pull it, you can't move it, eh?
You couldn't
Which
slide it
is-
on the shaft itself.
It won't slide on the shaft, which is what you want. That way the cart is kind of locked in place. It's not going to bump the horse from behind if you're going down a hill or if the horse stops. And if the horse goes to back up, you can just simply back up and the cart has to go too. Okay.
So just as long as they're not like really flopping around.
If you're driving and your shafts are bouncing up and down, that tells me that the wraps aren't tight enough.
Okay.
Okay? They don't have to be that tight if this is in the proper place. And this, in this case, this one should be back, 3 inches or so. But that's the most important thing is the wrap. And if you have a trainer or something, or somebody with some driving experience, get them to help you harness a couple times. Won't have any problems at all. Now the last thing is the lines. If you check your horse up really tight, you don't want to leave him standing with it checked up too tight. This guy's just loose, and he's a young horse, so it kind of holds him in place, and he keeps his attention while we're harnessing him.
Oftentimes, though, too, you'll just wait till harness everything else up and then do the checkup at the very end.
Right.
Especially if they're a little frisky. Wouldn't you say?
Well,
Depends.
The older horses, that's what we do for sure.
Okay.
We just check them up and then go. Okay, 2 lines. Run through the running martingale, through the turret. Buckle it onto the bit. Some cheap harness has snaps that go on the bit instead of a buckle. Very dangerous, actually. Never use a snap. It might work, but you might pay big time for it too. Make sure you have a rein stop on there so that this buckle doesn't get pulled back if the horse should jump or something, especially a young horse, and your running martingale get caught on here, then you're going to have a wreck. So make sure you have a rein stop of some kind, just to keep this buckle
So if they did a sharp turn, so the buckle doesn't get into here. Yep.
Right. Then I'll do the other side,
horse.
same thing. I haven't harnessed the horse for 6 months. There we go, boy.
Buckle to the outside.
Right. Here, pay attention. There we go. There, I think we're ready to go.
Final inspection before you get in.
Final inspection. This horse has been driven once before, so he's actually standing very good. I don't know if we want to tape my driver on the yard with him or not.
I think we should.
Do you think we should?
Sure.
Well, okay, I'll get in the cart, then you can take the halter off.
Yep.
And we'll see what happens.
And I guess always just make sure your lines are straight once you,
Yes, that's a good point.
from the bit to
Yeah.
your hands.
Especially if you're showing your horse, nothing looks worse in the ring than lines that are all twisted up and stuff. Okay? We can talk about that too a little bit when I get in the cart. I'll just sit in the cart. Oh boy.
Remind him of what it's like to have weight in the cart, is what you're
Yeah.
saying?
There we go.
Attaboy.
You want to, when you're driving, you want to have, I like to drive like this. I guess a lot of people drive like that, but a well-trained horse, I like to drive like this and have it, and I drive basically with my little fingers, and you can go around in a circle or something just by tweaking them a little bit of pressure with your little finger. A young horse, of course, is different, but if you go to turn, let's say I want to turn left, I don't take the pressure off the right line at all. I just tighten the left line a little bit and he'll turn that way. That way you don't have his shoulder dropping and stuff when you make the turn. But he can, like they can feel a fly on their skin, so a piece of metal in their mouth and you pull on it a little bit, they can feel it and they soon catch on that we're supposed to turn this way or that way. Okay? And you don't want to hold your lines way back here, especially with a young horse, because if that horse jumps, you're going to go over backwards, right, before you can catch your line. So, and you don't want to drive with your lines leaning ahead like this, and a lot of people do that, first of all, it looks like you're scared. And secondly, if you were going to drive down the road for an hour, would you be able to sit there comfortably like that? You couldn't, eh? So
But it also would put more weight on the back pad of the horse when you're tipped forward, right?
Somewhat, but a well-balanced cart compensates for that pretty good.
Okay.
But just sit straight back and sit comfortably, just like you're enjoying yourself, which is what you're supposed to do.
Which you forget to smile though yourself sometimes.
Well, I know, I look too serious, but
Can I undo
I'm
him?
usually driving a young horse, and maybe I should be serious.
Okay, I'm gonna undo his halter.
Okay, we'll see what happens here. Sure.
Maybe I'll undo his halter. Okay. What's this horse's name?
So, Sport. This
Sport.
is Sport.
Oh, Sport.
Okay, Sport, back up. Back up. Back up. Back. That a boy. Back. Back. That a boy. Back. 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 That's cool. That's okay. Okay.
Want me to help step him up just to start, or?
Yeah, just.
Yeah, second boy. Okay, easy.
There you go. Thank you.
So how would you tell a person you use the whip, generally?
I always like to keep my lines fairly snug and just use the whip as a guide to get them to move and stuff. Lots of people flop their lines and stuff and tell them to get up.
That's not
That's
proper.
okay for around the yard, I guess, but especially if you're going to show your horse, you don't want to do that. And they'll get better with voice command too, but if you have the whip, then you can just touch them if they need a little bit of a tune-up. They can feel a fly, so they can feel you with touching the whip.
So it'd be interesting to see the difference in his steering from now here at the end of April till, you know, a couple of months down the road.
It's not really fair to just harness them after driving them once and then have 6 months off and try to drive them. I should do some work with them in the round pen first and get them line drive a bit, and in a month's time you won't know it's the same horse. But right now he's fighting a bit. He's not really paying attention.
When you're 75, you don't need to be doing a whole bunch of line driving and walking
There
behind.
we go. Yeah. But yeah, that's our drive for today. Not very fancy, but
He's pretty relaxed to start.
okay.
So that's how you would line drive.
Without the credit card.
Oh, without the cart, yeah.